What's happening, YouTube? This is Nick Leonard with Just Us League Swag, and I'm going to be showing you my Regalia Genesis deck profile that I used for the Premium Vanguard tournament this past weekend up at White Plains, New York. This deck is a lot of fun to play. I started off with Genesis and pretty much have been playing Genesis the entire time. So our team, which consisted of myself, my teammates, Brent Wallace and Jeremy Dixon. Shout outs to you guys for being awesome and making it into top 8 and then fighting our way to second place, which is awesome. So I'll get into the tournament report in a little while, just after I go through the deck profile. But I will say that we went into that day with very low expectations. We were pretty much all ready to bounce at that point, and we were just there to, have fun and see how far we could go. We ended up losing the first round of that tournament, which was very, depressing, but we fought our way back. So let's get into the deck profile. So the starter here is Daylight Angel. I'll briefly go over the skills because Regalia is not a popular deck, so a lot of you probably will be kind of ignorant of what the deck does. She's the OG starter and very simple. You pop her into Soul, you look at the top 3, put 1 into Soul, 1 to drop, and if you Soul Charge the Regalia, you get to draw a card. It's unfortunate you don't get to add 1 to your hand, but what she does is she helps fill your soul and fill your drop zone, which Regalia needs because Regalia likes to soul charge from the drop zone. I'm not running one of the new V starters for the draw just because this deck, unfortunately, for pretty much all of their scales requires a Regalia in the name. As you'll see that later, that pretty much most of my other units are Regalia except for the triggers, so it's pretty much just a souped up G deck, which is kind of unfortunate, but as you'll see, each card has a lot of value to it. So for the grade 3s, I'm running 4 of the new Angelica, which shares the same name as the original Break Ride. She's just awesome. On Ride, you get to Soul Charge 1 from your drop, and you get to draw a card, so that's an instant plus. And then she's got a Stride Bearer skill that lets you check the top 4, add 1 to hand, 1 to Soul, and the rest go to drop. So in terms of consistency and getting the pieces that you need, this card is awesome. If you have all your field pieces, you add a Perfect Guard or a heal trigger to hand for shield, or if you're missing that clutch piece that you need to Soul Charge 2 from your drop to get you your soul count requirements for Minerva and, your power requirements, just in terms of tutoring and getting the pieces and consistency that you need, it's just awesome. Lots of plussing with her. With the last grade 3, I am actually running 3 copies of the original restanding Minerva. So the reason why I ran her was, well, for one big reason, and then kind of like a, icing on the cake type of second reason, but this was really a meta choice against the Nubatama matchup, because she has Lord. When my opponent wants to use Renee, I can basically call 2 of her. And since she has Lord and my opponent, who is now in control of this unit, has a non-Genesis card she cannot attack. And I'll explain later that ended up working out clutch against my one Nubatama matchup where, he did the hand discard. Then he followed up with Renee, tried to poke me with 26k, 2 crit attacks, and I said you can't attack with her because she's got Lord. Second reason is, and it actually came up one time, unfortunately I healed out of it, but I went first and my opponent rushed me and put me down at 4 damage, so her limit break skill was active. Unfortunately, I could not get the restand off because I healed out of it. Old school problems, right? Though I will say, if that heal was a crit instead, I definitely would have used the restand skill, because my opponent was at 2, would have pushed them to 4, and then they would have had to have blocked the restand. So yeah, OG Minerva. So the next next onto the grade 2s, I'm running 4 Freya. This card has so much value to it. For the cost of a counterblast, you get to draw a card, soul charge 2 from your drop zone, and then once you get to Generation Break, anytime your Vanguard swings, she gets +3. And well, since Minerva is a restand, you ultimately end up getting +6 with her. So this card just gets so much value. The draw, the soul charge, and the power. Not only that, her first skill is a non-GB skill, so if you end up going first, you can still do something with her. Next grade 2 is Bragi. This card is your beat stick, very similar to Freya. However, you can get this off with the first attack with Minerva, and she's got a very simple skill, GB only really. But on place, you soul charge 2 from your drop to Regalia. Any type of soul charging this deck needs a Regalia name specifically. You give your Vanguard and this unit +3 for each card soul charge. So 2 cards every time. So you're given this +6 and your Vanguard +6. And that +6 is important because that helps you hit numbers, especially when you're going against a 12K Vanguard. This with a 7K booster with the +6 is 22. So that hits a nice magic number. And then you throw another +6 on the column, which is very easy to do with this deck with all your different +3 increments, and you can hit a nice easy magical 28 with this, which is really good against, well, both force and all the protect and the excel grade 3s. For the grade 2s, we have Genial. This card is very simple. This is just used to Soul Blast, and pretty much anytime you Soul Blast her, a dude on your food gets +3,000, and this is just used to help with numbers. So this card's nice because what you can do is use your axe skills on your Soul Blast to Soul Blast it out. Use her skill to give +3 and pump up your field. Then you can use one of the other grade 2s to put it back into Soul. And then during battle phase, when you swing with Minerva, you can Soul Blast them out again to pump up your field even more. So another way to look at this is, main phase Soul Blast 2, give +6, Soul Charge. When you attack, +6 again. So you just pumped up your field by 12 just using her, let alone all your other +3 skills. So for the grade 1s, I am actually running Jotun, the grade 1 PG for Regalia. Again, it's got a Regalia name, which is important, but even more importantly is she is a recycling PG. Anytime you Soul Blast her out, if you have another copy in drop zone, you can bind it and add it back to hand. It's not exactly the same, but it works similar to the Shadow Paladin grade 1, which lets you recycle, but it's not an infinite recycle because eventually you will bind them all. But being able to recur a PG when stuff hits so hard is really clutch. I mean, I don't feel bad riding this at all, and then when my opponent strides first using a PG, goes to drop, and then on my next turn I Soul Blast the card I rode, and then now boom, another PG back in hand. What's really nice, though it didn't come up, is if I played against the OTT deck, I could still guard as opposed to using draw trigger PGs. Next we got 4 Stride Fodder, 4 Regalia. Pretty simple card. You don't really want to ride Minerva, the OG in Minerva, so you need this to search out Angelica, because she is such an important piece to the deck. All right, so the next grade 1 is we run 4 Expel Angel. This card is awesome. Essentially, once you get your engine going in striding, and you call it. It's got an axe skill, which is nice, so you can keep on using it each turn. It lets you put 3 normal units, Regalia of course, back into the deck. It gets power and lets you draw a card. Slap 2 of those on, and every turn you're recycling cards because you do soul charge and go through your deck pretty quick. You gain power to hit numbers, and then you draw a card. I mean, this deck gets so much hand advantage and plussing when you start getting into your stride game that there are times I end my turn even after hitting hard with 6 attacks and the restand, and end my turn with like 15 cards in hand. It's absolutely ridiculous. Finally, for the grade 1s, I'm running Skuld. The reason why I'm running this is mainly because I didn't feel like there was any other good Regalia choices to fill this spot. Another one of the grade 1 Regalias you could use, and I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but basically it's an on place, you soul charge 3 Regalias from your drop zone, and that's about it. However, as long as you have competency and you can manage your resources fine, I never got into an issue where I didn't have enough soul to pay for my costs. And long story short, this does almost the same thing that Expel Angel does, except that it doesn't get power, and you get the draw at the end of the turn after you get soul blasted at one point during your turn. Nice thing though is it gets the soul charge in. Now I will say this card is really nice against the Link Joker matchup, especially when you end your turn. If this thing is locked and it unlocks, since it's an end phase skill and it's still your turn, you can actually proc the skill. And if you're playing against cards like Chaos Breaker and whatnot, where they can retire on your unlocks, since you're turn player, you can resolve your skill first before your opponent has a chance to retire and draw, which is really nice. So it can, get you that small little, extra against that Link Joker matchup. Fortunately, I didn't have to play it. As for the trigger lineup, I am actually running 8 critical, 4 of the new Kakura Hime V-Series trigger, 4 Cyber Tiger, which is also V-Series, and then I am running the Regalia Kakura Hime and the Regalia Heal trigger. So in this deck, the 12 crit restand is so much pressure, especially with Minerva on the quad drive. Your opponent, if they no guard at 3 damage, really should be sweating. And on top of that, Minerva hits so hard because her skill gives herself a whole boatload of power, plus 10, and your rear guards can give your Vanguard power, and with the booster, you can easily swing with 50,000 on each attack, and with the new V-Series triggers hitting 10k for each drive, that's pretty much perfect guard, or you're dropping 2 G Guardians or a G guarding and 2 and 3 additional cards just to block the first attack. And with the restand, it's actually really nice because you can if your opponent does like a 2 or 3 to pass, you can gamble and actually put everything on Vanguard because you're just going to get the restand. It happened one time, but my opponent made it 2 to pass, and I think on the 3rd check I hit a trigger and I decided to give it to Vanguard because, well, it wouldn't be wasted because I'd get the effect on the restand, and I was lucky enough to get the trigger on the 4th check and poke through it and got game. As for the other triggers, this trigger is really good. She actually pumps up your field and recycles herself by letting you draw another card. Not only that, it's a Regalia name, which is important. And as for the heal triggers, you don't need the counter charge, soul charge effect really that much. I didn't find myself using it that much. But what's important is you need the Regalia name for consistency. I did try for a little bit to run the V series heal triggers, but there were times where I was getting awkward scenarios where I didn't have enough Regalia names in the drop zone to soul charge to get my effects. So this was just a consistency thing. If they ever release new V series triggers with Regalia name, I'll easily swap these out. So that's it for the main deck. For the extra deck, we get into two Moosebill. She's basically your first stride if you don't happen to have the heal trigger in your hand to G-Guard and first stride into Minerva. Essentially, she's the best first stride Regalia has right now. On top of that, she's got Regalia in the name, so you can proc Angelica's stride break skill. It's not a terrible card, but it's not as heavy hitting as a lot of other first strides. She pumps up your board a little bit, and she lets you draw a card or I guess I should say, or counter charge. You mainly use it for the draw skill. So the bread and butter in this deck, the MVP, would have to be Minerva. I mean, this card is so strong. It's a shame she was released in it was either the last or second to last set. Not including Bermuda. So the one with Renee and whatnot, but this card is so strong. Especially, so essentially you Soul Blast 3 for her first skill, and she gets plus 10k and 1 extra drive check. And then her second skill, which is the GB3 skill, is at the end of the battle she attacks, you discard a card, Soul Blast 6, and at the end of the battle you restand your entire field. Of all Regalias, to be more specific, and that includes herself. So she restands herself and your entire field. So that's guaranteed at least 6 big attacks, and hers are going to be especially big. 50-some thousand 4 drive checks. 60 or 70,000 with 1 drive check because she restands with drive minus 3. So where I got a lot of my games, and this is where practice and strategy comes in hand, is if I opened up in my mulligan a gray or a heal trigger, I always kept it, just because if I'm forced to stride second, I can always G-Guard and then stride into Maneuver as my first stride, and I either would bop them right on that turn with so much pressure on my first stride, or I would set them so far behind that they couldn't recover, because even if they survived, I would have like a 12 to 15 card hand that they would have to blow through, which had a lot of shield, heal triggers, perfect guards, you name it. MVP of the deck, and is one of the reasons why Regalia is so strong. If they ever release V-Series units with Regalia in their name, especially if they ever get a grade 3 with a force marker, this card is going to be even stronger, because those units are going to be supercharged with extra shield, extra attack, and you can get the force marker, put that on rear guard. That's 2 attacks with that pumped up rear guard. So I can only hope that will happen. The rest of the G zone is basically filler and fluff. I never got to use it. Let's see here. I run 2 copies of Earth. She's basically there if I somehow get through 2 Minervas and my opponent doesn't die, still survives, and they don't have a PG. I'll go into Earth next. Basically, pump her up, get her up to over 100,000. 6 or 7 critical, and yeah, good luck guarding her. Unfortunately, with PG, she doesn't work against that. If that fails, or if I know my opponent has a PG, I will go into the GB8, which is Pallas Athena. It's a decent card. I mean, it pumps up your field nice. You don't get any restand or anything like that. She gets a critical, but I mean, usually at that point, your opponent has exhausted all their resources, so they will really. I've never gone past this stride. I never had to use it at the tournament, which was nice, but she's there if I ever got to that point. And then Ultima. I don't think I would ever stride into him over Minerva, or if somehow they survived all that and I happen to have the Persona drop for his cost, and the 2 counterblast. Honestly, he was there just in case. I don't know if I got into time or something and I was at 5 and my opponent was at 4. I could just use his skill, stack 2 heals, and win the game that way. I never really expected him to go into him. The rest are G guards. I'm running 6 G guards, basically there for variety. I'm using Ear. She's good because she lets you soul charge up to 4 from your drop zone, sets you up for next turn, and she can get you a 30k shield, which makes you a nice 41, so I can do a lot of 1 card guards with that. If I don't need the power and I just need soul charging, I'll use Iris. She's only a 20k shield, but you could soul charge and be specific with anything about her, which is nice. If for whatever reason I don't have a drop zone, or I don't have any regalias in my drop zone that I want to soul charge, I can use this G Guardian here. Basically, if I have a copy of something on my field in my soul, she gets 25k power, or for a total of 25k. And then the Super G basically gets buff for normal units that I shuffle back into my drop zone, either from soul and or drop zone. It's help for deck out control, but it never came to that. Basically, she was only used when I blow through my 2 powerful G guards and I still need a G guard to get shield. Then I would go into her. So that's pretty much the deck profile. As it plays, it's mainly a G deck, so your early game is really weak. When this deck has a struggle against early game decks like Blasters, or what's the one, Spike Brothers, where they hit really hard. If you can survive all that and get to striding, you'll be able to recover from that really quick because of all the drawing, and with the quad check, well, technically 5 drive checks if you consider it restand, you're likely, or more likely, to check heal triggers so you can recover from that. All right, so I'll go into the tournament play. I personally went 8-2 overall, going, let's see here, 8-2 overall, and going 5-2 in Swiss. So round 1, I ended up playing against Shadow Paladin. This matchup was actually a very close one. He ended up striding against me first, and he was able to do the Ogma turn first, which really hurt. And by the end of his attacks, I think I had 1 card on field and 1 card in hand, which was used for stride. However, on my turn, I had G-guarded that turn before, so I was able to hit hard on my crackback. And the deck is able to draw so much, I was able to recover, but I couldn't hit as hard as I normally did on my Minerva swings because my lanes, in terms of numbers, wasn't ideal, so he was able to survive through that. And then on his next turn, he drove check a heal trigger, which probably got him the game because he had that G Guardian to block one of my Minerva swings on the following turn, and he was able to eat 1 more damage that he didn't necessarily want to eat, or didn't have to block. So because he ended his turn with practically no cards, maybe one card in hand. So, but the following turn, he ended up going into ultimate off Luard's skill, and then I just didn't have enough shield at that point, so he got that one. But it was still a good fight. Not only that, let's see here, another one of our teammates lost. So we actually, as a team, lost the first round, which was a huge bummer because, well, losing your first round is kind of always disheartening, but we ended up riding the losers bracket, and the team overall won every single game, rounds 2 through 7, which was awesome. So round 2, I played against Victor. Honestly, I ended up destroying this guy. He got first stride, but his first stride was really weak. I didn't get really any counterblasts to him, and then I attacked any rear guard he called early before stride, make him drop shield or lose field resources. So I mean, he had a strong first stride, but it wasn't mind-blowing where I went from 1 to 6. And then basically I G-guarded, and then I did a first stride Minerva. He was able to survive, but I exhausted pretty much all of his resources. His crackback was not that strong at all, and then I just followed up with a Minerva on the second Minerva stride. Round 3, I played against Ange for the win. This deck was this deck is always a tough battle because of all their G guards, recycling G guards, being able to use 8 G Guardians total because of that grade 2, and then all of their perfect guards. So I ended up doing 3 Minervas against her. You don't have to use the first skill, so you could restride Minerva for a third time. The reason why I did that was I knew on my second Minerva stride I wouldn't be able to blow through her hand, so I prepared for the next one. After that, she survived again, but barely, and then I actually went into Earth on my final stride, and at that point I had exhausted pretty much all of her resources, so she had to eat the 90,000 something 5 crit Vanguard. So I ended up pulling a win through that one. Round 4, I ended up losing the Blasters. This matchup was I basically got curd stomped on this one because my opponent got first stride and was able to get the souped up blaster blade at like 40 or 50,000 with 2 or 3 Flogel triggers in the back row with the counterblast to pay for it. And I had, in terms of sheer quality, absolute jack. If I remember right, I had maybe 115k shield trigger and nothing but grade 1s and grade 2s, which are all 5k in this deck. And essentially he got the crit and went on to just beat me with that blaster blade. I couldn't block it, so I died before I even had a chance to stride. So he got that win. I lost. Round 5, I played against Wiseman Loop. This was a pretty easy matchup. Basically, I hit hard and strong and finished him before he had a chance to loop me. Round 6 against Nubatama. So this match was interesting. One of our teammates, Brent, plays this deck, so I kind of knew how it functioned and I knew how to counter it. This is where the OG grade 3 maneuver came in clutch because he did his normal shenanigans where he called the bird and he bounced my field, but it didn't really hurt me because I had maybe, when he did it, 12 cards in hand, and he bounced my entire hand, which at that point makes it like 17. So discarding 5 didn't really hurt me at all. I think he called the grade 1 too as well to force me to discard another one, but my hand was so big that it didn't really faze me. And then he followed up by using Renee and I ended up calling the 2 Minervas, and at that point he couldn't attack with them, so I set them in the back row to use for next turn. And yeah, he basically had a vanilla turn after that because Rene didn't do anything. And then I blocked what I needed, and in the following turn I Minerva'd him. Round 7 was against Blasters again. This time though, it was we played against some of our friends that go to, I believe it was Gritty Goblin and some of the other local shops in the DMV area. I played against this guy, Edgy, and he's a really great guy, and he was playing Blasters, and he's a really good player. Very similar to round 4, I was in a predicament where he strode first, and he had a souped up blaster blade, 40,000 power, 2 critical, or 1 critical. I ended up no guarding the Vanguard, and he gave the crit to Van. And he had 3 Flogels in the back. Now, luckily, I had the shield, the G Guardian, Perfect Guard, and some quality 15k trigger shields that I was able to go to 5 damage and block everything. And then on the following turn, I Minerva'd him and won. But that was a really, really close game because it just came down to the drive checks in terms of how many triggers he hit and how much power he was able to soup up his blaster blade. So that was really close. I remember that one vividly because he was at 4 damage and I did a Minerva swing with 4 drive checks and he no guarded it, and I didn't get the critical trigger on it, which was really frustrating because that would have sealed the game. So he took the 1 damage, and I think he hit a 5k defensive trigger, which really made me mad. And then I restood, and then I swung, and then he made it 1 to pass, and I was like, oh baby, if this was the time, it would be now, and I didn't hit the trigger. Now luckily he couldn't block one of my lanes, so I was able to deal the 6 damage. But I was nervous there for a second that he was going to survive that, because I didn't know if I could survive another round of that blaster blade shenanigans. So after round 7, the team went X-1, and we ended up getting 6th place in Swiss. In top 8, I ended up playing against the Pale Moon Loop, which ended up being a win. I honestly had no idea how the Pale Moon Loop works. All I know is, it's a loop, and with these loops, they require setup, and I know loops and decks that require setup are really prone to rush, so I basically aggroed really hard, and I was able to put so much pressure on my Minerva swing and set him back so far behind that he couldn't do the loop, and then I just finished him with Minerva on the second stride. My top 4 matchup played against Grand Blue. That was a win. I will admit that this one was a kind of a sacky win because he ended up no guarding my Minerva, my quad drive Minerva at 2 damage, and I ripped 3 criticals on her drive check, which was awesome because I've been, in terms of her drive check, been getting booty. So I was really excited I was getting some luck, but he had seen every heal out of his deck at that point, so he kind of just saw the 3rd crit and shook my hand and said, that's game. So that one was over quick and was kind of unfortunate, but yeah, I'll take the win. And then for top 2, I ended up playing against Kevin Ajolt's team, and I've played Kevin, let's see here. I played him at last regionals, I think it was in New Jersey, and he ended up knocking me out of top 8 premium last time, so I was kind of looking for some payback this time, and I got it. He ended up playing the Pale Moon Loop. I kind of knew roughly, since I played it in the top 8 matchup, what I was dealing with, but since I didn't get looped the first time, I wasn't 100% sure how it works, so I kind of just went with my strategy of pushing as much aggro as I physically could. And I got to my, he strode first. I noticed that he was damage denying me with this play style, so I kind of switched up how I was attacking and guarding, just so that I can get at least one counterblast to get my engine going. And luckily enough, I had the heel trigger, so I was able to G-guard on his first stride, which allowed me to aggro hard with my first stride, being Minerva. And I pushed enough aggro that apparently he was forced to guard with one of his key pieces that he would have used to loot me the following turn. So his following turn was very vanilla, and then on my next turn, I finished him off. Unfortunately, my other two teammates lost that one, so we ended up losing that and getting second place. But considering that, you know, we had low expectations going into this and whatnot, we were pretty thrilled that we got second place. I hope you guys got some value out of this. Please like and subscribe to our channel to more content, and I'll see you around.